Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another roadmap stream. How are you tonight, Matt?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Can we get a quick sound check from everybody? I know we ask every stream, but just want to make sure you can hear us all. And how is everybody in the chat tonight? Have you all had a good weekend? Have you had a good start to the week? Sound is good. That's what I like to hear. All good. Hello. Lots of hellos.
Weather's good outside. It was raining earlier on, but
It
it's
was.
uh, it's good. I went inside to get a drink, and I'd had nothing on my feet, and it was fine. And while I was inside, the heavens opened, so that was fun. I enjoyed that.
It made me happy that I didn't have to water all my plants tonight, actually.
That's good.
Now, we're not here to talk about the weather, are we?
Well, this is a British conversation, so
We are here to talk about the Rush Hour roadmap, and specifically, we're focusing on passengers tonight, aren't we, Matt?
we are indeed. Yes, the article just went out today, is it?
It did. It went out today, so it's all been timed quite nicely. So for anybody that has read the article, we're probably going to be touching on a lot of what was discussed in that article. But Matt's probably going to go a little bit in more depth and answer some of those questions that the community have had since we published that this afternoon. That's not all that's being discussed on the roadmap today. Obviously, we have added something new, which is an extension to the West Cornwall route, which is an extension to St Austell. So that's exciting. Are you
That's
looking forward
awesome.
to that, Matt?
Oh, I'm looking forward to that a lot. I love the railways down the West Country.
That's great. I've actually been there once, I believe. But yeah. And
I don't think I've been there at all, but I've
really?
driven them in train sims, and therefore
Okay.
they're awesome.
Okay.
I travel virtually all over the world from my desk.
And so yeah, should we get into the passenger stuff, the juicy details?
Go for it.
So we will answer many questions that have been asked on the forums, and then I'll also try and answer as many questions that crop up in the chat. So please do feel free to ask questions as we go. But first of all, Matt, what are some of the big changes to passengers?
So we wanted to, with rush hour, one of the things we wanted to do was boost the number of passengers. Now, passengers are not the only thing to focus on. They're certainly not the only thing that has been focused on. There's a number of key elements that you need to think about when in terms of rush hour. One of them is volume of trains, and the other one is the volume of passengers. So we can talk about volume of trains when we come to the specific route releases. But in terms of passengers, there's with the current release, kind of the situation you're in is there's not enough.
Yep.
There's too much Clone Wars. There's too many of the same one. When they walk in a straight line
Mm-hmm.
in single file. So there's a number of problems there, or think areas that it can be optimized. So what have we done? So one of the first things we've done is spent an awful lot of time optimizing the way that passengers are dealt with within the system, and that's involved going right down into the depths of Unreal and working on their Nav Mesh system and improving the performance of that as well,
Now,
and rebuilding our characters so that they're more optimally built. And what the goal of that is, you can't just say, so on the PC
yeah,
there is a limit of, in the current release there is a limit of 100 characters.
yeah,
And on the consoles, on Xbox One, PS4, there is a limit of 20.
which is quite low,
Um,
really.
it's very
20
low,
is
and it's
not
one.
many people.
It's not many, and with some of the other misbehaviors of the system, you might not even get all 20. So it's we've uncovered a number of interesting things while we've been doing with this. So the first step is, the sort of the brute force approach to this is we'll just get more passengers in the world. So the optimization is about enabling us to do that
Mm-hmm.
without overloading, and just because you can just dial the number up,
Yeah.
the limits can just be dialed up, but then the FPS will go down because we've
Hmm.
drained on things, which means we'd have to do less elsewhere. That's clearly not the right answer. So by optimizing the way characters worked, we've been able to increase the number of characters without costing any more in terms of frame rate. So I don't want to give final numbers yet because we're
Yeah.
still doing final tuning on it as the roots are coming together. But all platforms, including Xbox One and PS4, are seeing a reasonably substantial increase in number of characters. So that's the first thing that already looks better.
Now,
Oh, sorry.
during that explanation, you mentioned something called Nav Mesh. Now,
Yes.
what is Nav Mesh?
So Nav Mesh is a system that is part of Unreal. It's a core part of Unreal. It's a short form for navigation mesh, and it's the way that Unreal knows where it can move AI non-player characters, bots as they're called. So if you're in think of Unreal as normally used for first-person games, and where you want all of the other characters to be able to move around. Essentially, you draw on the ground, or it figures out actually automatically pretty much where all of the characters can move, and that includes going upstairs and so on and so forth. And one of the screenshots in the Dovetail Live article actually shows that nav mesh. It's the green highlight on top of the steps,
Yes.
and on top of the floor. So everywhere there's green, characters can move around, and it can freely choose somewhere in that area to move characters. So the nav mesh system and how the bots move around are what's important. Oh, my ears! No, my
Wait,
ears are fine.
your ears.
They're fine.
Are
This
they
is the
back to
front.
front?
Right? They're back to front. Happy. Right, the world is now feeling a much better place. It's not as bad as earlier on when I realised after a day's worth of busy meetings my t-shirt was inside out. But never mind. Um,
Sorry, we interrupted. You were on such a good flow then as well.
oh dear, oh dear. So yes, the optimizations for Nav Mesh are about the steps that are involved with actually deciding where a character can move, the path finding, and then actually moving a character. Because with the characters, I'm going to use another technical term, draw calls, which is the number of calls it has to do so to achieve a goal. So to update the screen, and characters were something like 5 or 6 draw calls per character. That's ridiculous.
Okay.
That was something
Yeah.
that we found out. It was effectively doing, in a number of draw calls per character. So we needed to. One of the key things we've done is we've massively reduced that number by just changing the way that the characters are constructed, because it would effectively like move the bottom half of the character, the top half of the character, the textures. It was just really silly how it was being done. So. But this is with the fullness of time. You look back on it. You will always look back on your previous code and go, "What's going on here?" So that's one of the big steps, and another step has been just optimizing the models, making them more friendly to the drawing and so forth. So there's some big improvements there. So the first step then has been to just dial up the number of people. But then one of the things that we found, well, if you dial up the number of people, immediately what you find is the Clone Wars gets really bad.
Yeah, so are they all sort of marching behind each other and walking really weird and just looking a bit
Well, it's not
odd?
even so much that, although that is a thing, but where it's if you've gone from say 100 to 200 characters on the screen, and you've got only 10 different types of character, all you've done is increased a little bit of duplication to a massive amount of duplication. And you'll see the same person in a suit with a bald head 50 times instead of 20 times. So it was really key that one of the things we need to do was massively improve the variety of the characters as well. So because that needed to be done even before you improve it. I mean, even with the system as it stands, the variety of the characters wasn't enough. So if we're going to increase the volume of characters, it's just going to get epically worse. So what we did there is we explored 3 different avenues. The first one is the very simple, let's just create more characters. So
Yeah.
this isn't more heads, the same number of heads. So our characters are actually made in bits. There's hair, there's head, and then there's body, essentially. So there's no more heads and there's no more hairs, although we have improved the hairs. They now render and don't look weird or...
So is that why in those images some of the outfits have invisible bodies? Because you create it differently. or is
Yeah.
that just a
Yeah,
coincidence?
and then they're pieced together
Right.
essentially as part of the process. So that's another thing that I'll get into as well is
Okay.
how that actually happens because there's some improvements to how that works. But essentially, what it means. So I saw someone actually asked on the forums actually about does this mean more heads? And no, it doesn't mean more heads, and it doesn't mean more hairs. So what it does mean is more outfits. So the clothes that the characters are wearing is what's changed there. So we've added 8 new outfits.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 4 for male characters, 4 for the female characters, and within those, it's 2 summer and 2 winter each.
Yes.
So there's a variety across the board on that stuff. So that's the first step is just add more outfits and adding different outfits than we've seen before as well. So none of the female characters were wearing a dress, for example,
Mm-hmm.
previously. So that's been rectified. And there's different casual clothes for the males. I think there's a formal clothing for one of the female characters, and so on. So there's different types of outfits in
Yeah.
there. There's not just variations on what's there. It's actually different outfits, which is cool. Shlau Marvin, no, there's no pets, I'm afraid. Um, so the next thing then is two topics, or the next two, sorry, are palletization and patternization. So
Yes.
palletization is color. So what this means is that if you have a character in the current game and they have a white top and jeans, they will always have a white top and blue jeans.
Mm-hmm.
Always. So that's why you'll see 15 people with white tops and blue jeans.
Yes, we do
Um,
sometimes see people with like who have literally bought exactly the same outfit.
Exactly. So with palletization, we can for each outfit say, well, for the t-shirt, actually, this is a reasonable set of colors for the t-shirt. This is a reasonable set of colors for the jeans, which then
Mm-hmm.
means it can combine those dynamically, which means your t-shirt can now be in one of 20 colors, and
Yeah.
your jeans can be maybe various shades of blue or gray or something like that. So you can put sensible colors into those things. So it means that you've got, suddenly that one outfit is now 40 outfits
Yep.
because of all the variation you can put into there, which is really interesting. And then the next thing is patternization. So if you've got a t-shirt, then sometimes those t-shirts will have spots, sometimes they'll be plain, sometimes they'll have zigzags, sometimes stripes, and all sorts of other different patterns that have been created. So if you have someone in a t-shirt with stripes and
Mm-hmm.
one set of colors, someone with polka dots in different set of colors, again same outfit, but now they look really really different. um
Now,
go on.
do you have any kind of obviously you've mentioned how many different masculine outfits there's going to be and how many feminine outfits there's going to be. Do you have any idea about the how many different variations of textures there's going to be, or how many different variations of color there are, or is it potentially infinite?
It's not infinite, but it's going to work out. It's going to multiply up really large. I don't have the exact number because different clothes have different. So, like jeans can't multiply to very many different colors because you don't want strange colored jeans. You want jeans that still look like jeans, but in the various shades that they're in. T-shirts can be can quite a lot more wacky, and especially they can have lots more all the patterns on them. So things like that, and hoodies and pullovers and things can have wide variety of stuff. So suits are another example. There's only a limited number of colors for the suits, but the
Mm-hmm.
ties they can go as wacky as they like because that's completely appropriate. Um,
Yes, we did
so
share a lovely picture, didn't we?
yeah, it was completely random. And I just saw that and I'm like, nice, and I took a screenshot of it because it was a man standing there in a pink winter overcoat, wearing a pink tie, and that's just completely randomly created and awesome. Um, but never seen it. Never seen that combination. In fact, to be honest, pink rarely comes up. But no, it was fun to see. But there's all sorts of really fun combinations that come out there. So it's really interesting to see that. But what it means is that the variety of the different clothes is significantly greater without needing extra 3D models, because extra 3D models is where your memory usage goes up is the biggest increase in your memory usage. So you don't want to do that if you can help it. Um, Now, the way that these are combined is so again, like I said, we've got hairs and heads, and we've got bodies and so forth. So when the game boots up, I can't remember exactly where it's where you go into the world or whether when it boots up, but essentially what it does is it will dynamically combine a bunch of sets together. So that it doesn't have to do it on runtime. So as part of loading the game or loading a route, it will build all these sets into memory, and then they're ready to use all the time. So it doesn't have, this is one of the things for removing stuttering and so on and so forth. So we pre-cache a bunch of stuff. Now, one of the really neat things is that while for example, on an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4, there is a smaller amount of variety that it can create, or the volume of characters it can create in terms of that variety. I think that's 20 different types of characters that it can make. That is done pre-palletization. So it creates 20 different characters, but then when they actually get drawn in the world, they can have all the different colors applied to them. So even on an Xbox One or a PS4, you will massively see an improvement in the variety of characters. But on a PS5, Series XS and PC, you'll see that number even bigger, because the total number of types it can make, because they've got more memory on those platforms, is bigger still. So lots more characters in the world is one of the aims.
Yep.
Lots more variety of those characters, so you don't see duplicates, is the other aim.
Now, before we continue on with more talk of Passengers, because obviously we've got quite a lot to talk about, haven't we? Just want to answer a few questions from the chat.
Go.
So I'm seeing a lot of people asking about Dresden and some of the stuff that we discussed in the Thursday stream last week. We don't have any more news to share with you regarding that. And the stream last week, we covered an awful lot of community questions. So I would recommend that if you still have questions regarding the announcements last week, go and have a watch of the stream if you haven't already. It was on Thursday last week. I'm seeing other people asking when Rush Hour is releasing. So it is still releasing in the summer. This actually brings me on to a question that I've seen on the forums, which was, with Boston Providence still being in production, if accurate, there's no way this can be coming in the next few weeks. I've got nothing against DTG spending more time on these Rush Hour routes, but they should be upfront about it. So we have no plans to be pushing it back into autumn or winter. I know that everybody's a little bit worried that's what's going to be happening, but we are still planning for all of the Rush Hour routes to come out in summer. So that gives you a good idea of when you can expect it. Obviously, I can't give you an exact date, and I think you all know I'm not going to do that. But just a little bit for more information for you on that one. How do we define summer? I'll let you guys figure out what's considered summer. And then something else. Obviously, this isn't quite passenger related, Matt, but you might have more clarity. Since last week's discussion about the PS4 save file progress being available, or maybe not for the PS5 next gen version, has there been any further update? Yes or no?
There's no further update in terms of coding. We've had discussions with Sony. We now know what needs to be done, but now we're trying to just work out the right way to put that into the game. Yep. We definitely appreciate the problem that causes by not being there, but we need to try work out what we can do about that safely and without causing other problems, essentially. So at this point in time, continue to assume it's not there, but also know in the back of your mind that we understand that, and we are looking at what we can do about that.
That's great. Now back to Passengers. If it's okay with you, I'll ask you a couple of questions that have cropped up while you were talking.
Mm-hmm.
Will there be more facial expressions? They look fed up on the train. I've asked you this, haven't I? Because they look a bit like they're staring into the void sometimes.
Yeah, there's no change to the faces, unfortunately. We wanted to actually redo all the faces when we started the project and create all new heads, particularly because there's some really nice work going on the fishing game that we also make. But unfortunately, the way that fishing creates the characters don't port well into the system that we've got. In fact, don't port at all into the system that we've got. So that's going to become a bigger project that we might look at later on. So certainly for now, for this release, the characters themselves, other than the new new outfits that have been created are the same.
Only me has asked something that I hadn't even thought about until this very second. Is Train Sim World still a world without kids?
It is. And
I'd
it's the
never even
same as
thought about that.
it's also a world without pets. It's a world without elderly people.
It's
Um,
true.
so it's essentially because we have one skeleton. In
Yeah.
the way the game represents characters internally is with a skeleton bone structure, and we have one.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly a male and a female one. I can't remember, but we have just a limited one. So to actually, we would have to map more. And historically, we have tried to, in the past, we sort of, we think we modelled a child for a promo video in one of the early ones, and it wasn't great.
Yeah.
And so kind of everyone promised to never do it again. So we know what we want to do with that.
Yeah.
But you can't at the moment. Each of the characters also is their own entity. They kind of walk around. You don't say if we were to put children into the world at the moment, they'd just be running around a platform doing their own thing. Which so you'd need to create family clusters. You need to be able to create the child staying
Yeah.
near an adult. So all of a sudden, it's not just adding a character, which is hard in its own right. It's actually then quite an additional bit of technical tech that's required to actually make that make sense.
Because you don't really want kids unsupervised running around a platform that's hardly safe.
It isn't, and Crucible says sounds realistic enough, and to some extent, it's not entirely unrealistic. It's not the world we want to put forward, though. It's the world everyone would look at and go, "Tut tut tut." That's not really very good, is it? It's so we want to try and represent the in a sensible world. And not only that, we do also have occasionally passengers will push each other onto the tracks,
Yeah.
and that would be even worse. So
Yeah.
it's again, there's been some stuff to hopefully improve that side of things as well. So but no, there's no character, there's no children, there are no plans to include children at this time. But it's one of the things on the wider goals is how to win the variety side of things is that's key, obviously a key area, that and elderly and disabled people and all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things would add a lot more variety.
And then BT has asked, obviously, based off of what you said, we're increasing the density, we're increasing the variety. There's a lot for the engine to try and process. Is it going to affect the performance? Is all of this going to impact the way people play?
Shouldn't do. No, one of the things we've worked really hard with the optimization side of things is to make it to where the impact of having more characters around is minimal, if anything. And for the variety and so forth that's been added, we focused on things like color and patterns, which have very little impact on memory usage because of the way they're dynamically applied. And where we've added sort of the core variety improvements to additional outfits, we've only done a few of those because they're the ones that have the bigger impact. But even then, they're pretty small. So I think we've come up with a solution which gives you the most possible improvement in variety for the least possible impact in the game. So it should still run very well, but also look really good as well.
David Ham said passengers fed up and staring into space is perfectly normal on British rail services.
I was going to say it's what it looked like when I was using trains last.
um, all right. What next with regards to passengers? What else is new? I believe I saw somebody asking actually, and this was a question from the forums as well. Are they going to be walking around with umbrellas now?
No, no. That we wanted one of the things we wanted to do in this release was look at what we call accessories, things that a character can carry around and then dispose of when they don't need it. But we weren't able to get to that for this, so no. At the moment, they won't do that. What we have been able to do is get the winter stuff working, in and working, which is below 12 degrees centigrade. They will be the characters will spawn in winter clothes, and above between 12 and 18 it's kind of a combination because you'll always get in certain combinations you'll always find that crazy person in cold weather in a t-shirt. That's not unrealistic, but it becomes rarer as the temperatures get colder, and then above 18 degrees they're pretty much all in their summer clothes variants. So it gives you the variation in terms of the hot and the cold, but there's nothing there for umbrellas.
Anthony Pecoraro is asking, will the increase in passengers make it harder for players to walk on the platform? That's actually a really good question, because obviously sometimes they just don't get out of the way.
It may do, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's one way it can impact your gameplay, and it may make it to where actually you're more inclined to walk down if you're changing ends to do it on the train rather than on the platform. If the train is emptied but the platform is busy, maybe you walk down the train instead of walking along the platform. So that's one way it can impact your gameplay.
Mm-hmm. One of the comments from the forums is it would be awesome if we can adjust passenger density a bit, like we can adjust the weather. Now, is that feasible?
It's feasible. It's not something we've done. So
How come?
it is something that's come up in discussions. We just haven't got to it. We've been focusing on stabilizing what we've got. And it's something that we would like to do at some point, but it's not in there at this point, no.
And then one of the other questions from the forum is, I'm wondering if too much emphasis is being placed on passenger numbers as part of rush hour. Now, are the passengers the only thing you're focusing on with regards to rush hour? Is that it? You just want to get the numbers up, or have you also been focusing on other areas?
So we want to make it also more a believable experience. Actually, before we answer that, James Baby's asked an
Go for
interesting
it.
question. Summer at 18 centigrade, def's not Australia. Is this customizable per region? It's actually customizable per route. So when we make a route, we set up a bunch of curves, and one of the curves is at what temperature change the summer winter clothes happen. So that's done. A lot of this stuff is all defined on a per route basis. So back to the question. We wanted to improve the behaviors of the characters. So one of the key ones that you can see really obviously is that when the train empties, you get the big long marching line of the characters walking around in just this one single file line, because basically they've all worked out the shortest path from A to B, and they're all going to walk that shortest path. Hooray! And it looks dumb. So we've been able to make the characters prefer to stay a bit further away from each other. We've introduced social distancing of a sort. So the characters will now, obey a little bit of their personal space, and you get a much more natural spread. Then they're still obviously working in a line, but it's a wider line of a bit more random mishmash of characters. So it actually looks significantly better than it did when it was just this one single file nonsense. So that's in there. Another change is making it to where characters properly spawn on platforms as you're approaching stations.
Yes.
So previously they would start spawning at a place. So the goal was when you're on a platform, you shouldn't see characters popping in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
We want them to actually spawn somewhere else and walk onto the platform. The problem with that is as you're driving into the platform, that's what they're doing. So you arrive at Bakerloo, one of the stations on the Bakerloo line, just to pick an example, and the platform's pretty empty. And what's happened is, as you've approached it, it started spawning characters away from the platform. They are now walking down the corridors and down the stairs and onto the platform. Meanwhile, you're gone. So when you arrived and when you left, there was very little actually new characters arrived on the platform, and they all arrived and thought, "Hang on, where's my train?" So that was the wrong way of doing it. And so what happens now is, as you're approaching, they'll appear on the platform before you can see them, and they'll already be there. And then by the time you arrive in the platform, it should already be filled with characters. So that will make it, I think, much more realistic. And that's not more characters. That's just being cleverer with the characters we've got.
So we shouldn't have a situation where we're pulling up to a station and we see we see passengers popping into existence. It should be pre-populated.
That's the idea, yes.
Yeah.
With that stuff. So that's the goal we've been trying to put into that. Something else we've been looking at is waiting areas. Now, some routes have waiting areas outside of the platforms, and they specifically don't want passengers on the platforms for safety reasons because of the high volume of people that use the station. They keep them away from the platforms, which makes it easier for passengers to get off the train and clear the platform, and then let the new passengers get on. Now, currently, that's not supported. It's not represented. So we have a new system which now lets us represent that, and we can do that on a per station basis, not just on a per route, but each station that looks like it has that kind of a behavior, we can set that up, define find the waiting areas, then the passengers will spawn and arrive, and they'll go and wait in the waiting area. And then at the moment the train that they're waiting for is ready to board, they will then all walk through the gates and walk up and then board the train. So you get this kind of big swell of people marching their way, not in single file anymore, to get onto the train.
Yeah, I think we've all been in that situation where you sort of stampede towards the train.
Exactly. So in China, but now that's not relevant to all stations. It's not relevant to all countries,
Yes.
and that's fine. We just basically, as when we look at each station, we can work out, is that the appropriate thing to do there, and if it is, we've now got that capability to add that in.
That particular comment was actually mentioned on the forums earlier today. They were saying that in certain areas, particularly in, I believe, the US, that doesn't happen the same as it does in the UK. So that is something you will take into consideration.
Yes, and we have a new tool to use to help us now, but that doesn't mean we'll be using that tool everywhere in every station by any stretch. Those that you'll actually, it's more a tool that is probably going to be relatively rarely used, but it'll be useful where it is used. So, Brighton Station, for example, it's a good one to use it at. Victoria, possibly, it'd be a good one to use it at. Whereas all the stations pretty much between the two, probably not. So again, it's a nice flexible tool that we've got that we can employ where it's valuable to do so. So a minor improvement we've made is to improve the animation of characters going up and down stairs.
Yes.
What will happen? Previously, what happened there is the character went up and followed a diagonal path. They literally just followed this diagonal path and they walked, which meant they kind of looked like they were, it was just odd, frankly.
I believe you described it as going up an escalator because all the heads were exactly the same, and they were just
because all the heads would follow a diagonal line as well. And if you're a bit of a people watcher, just watch people going up and down stairs, and you can see the heads bobbing up and down because they're stepping up the steps.
Yep.
And it's a minor thing, but it makes a big difference to how they look in the current version. So we now have stair walking animations, which means that you get that kind of effect as they go up there. It's not a perfect implementation of stair walking, but we don't have inverse kinematics, so that we can, which means that we animate to do it the high-tech way that UE5 now sort of can do. You can actually animate the feet onto the steps, and it will work out the rest of the animation automatically. That's inverse kinematics. So this is a normal forward kinematics animation where we just animated a character, and then they just switched that animation when they're going up the stairs. It looks great. It's a heck of a lot better than what we had previously, and makes a big difference. On a number of stations, for example, Boston Back Bay, you arrive and you pull up and your cab is right next to the steps, so you're seeing them going up and down here. So this is not a subtle thing.
I believe it was also mentioned as well that the height of the passengers has been adjusted slightly, and that also helps, doesn't it, with the weird stormtrooper type thing we had going on.
Yeah, it's about creating a little bit of variety. So it's more of a scaling effect rather than so much a height. Because if you just adjust the height and you just make them shorter, then they get stumpy.
Did they look really weird?
It would do, and it's amazing. It doesn't take much to become sat in the uncanny valley, and it's sort of like you're looking at it. You can't quite see why something looks wrong, but you know it looks wrong. So you've got to be very careful with that. And actually, making any kind of substantial change to height is where you actually need a new character skeleton to actually drive it, and that's what we're not able to do at the moment. So what it actually does is it just applies a small change, higher or lower, to the scaling of the characters, which means that they still look in place, they still look fine, but there's no longer this flat line of heads along the top. So it adds just a little bit more natural and makes it a bit more natural. Which is these are all relatively small things that add up to the bigger picture of improvements.
Are we okay to take a couple of questions from the chat?
Go for it.
So, first of all, from Carter, will empty stock moves have no passengers?
So we have a new unload all instruction in the game. As of speaking right at this very second, doesn't work properly. So I am not going to guarantee it makes it into the final, but I'm told it's a relatively quick fix, so I am hopeful. It's certainly now programmed into all the timetables for all three routes, and the trains that are starting the yards are empty, and when they arrive at Boston or Stoughton, for example, they will empty themselves. They're just not doing it right at the moment, and it looks terrible. So that's what needs to be fixed at the minute. So at this point in time, I cannot 100% say that's in. I can say it's very close to being there, and I hope it will make it in. So we definitely want to get that in there. And Gareth says, will unload all be extended to other routes? That'll be a preserve crew task, and in theory, no reason why not.
Mark TCRS is asking, if I'm standing at a station on free roam, will I see passengers magically appear before the train comes into view?
No,
Ooh, no.
because it's done based on where you are. So now, if you are standing on the station, then they won't be spawning necessarily based on the train coming in at 60 miles or 40 miles an hour approaching the platform, because you're already there. Then the system, the way the character system works, it's actually linked into the PIS. In fact, it was the first thing that effectively the PIS is linked into the character system, but that's just a really weird way of looking at it. But the character system was the first one to do this. It's looking at what's going on in the timetable, and when it's sort of saying, when's the next train due on this platform? Oh, there's a train due in the next few minutes. Start spawning characters for this platform then. So it'll now start spawning characters for that. Now, if you're already on the platform, it can do that long before the train gets there. So you don't have this problem of the train arrives, no one's on the platform, and then the train leaves and the passengers arrive, because you're already on the platform, and it's where you are that triggers where the characters will be spawning. So if you're on Route 128 station, then characters will be spawning and so forth there. No characters will be spawning at Boston Station at that point. It'll pretend characters are spawning there, as it was as same as there are no physical trains. There's just pretend trains up in Boston while you're at Route 128 station. So the characters are where the people are. So it should be fine. Now, the game kind of does that at the moment, but again, there's been some tweaks to improve that behavior.
AFS5 has asked, which of these features are needed to be added by the preservation team on a case-by-case basis, and what will be available on every route from the start, which I imagine would be the release of Rush Hour? That's actually a really good question. Are you able to clarify a little bit more what will be coming to everybody with the core update and what will be coming with Rush Hour only?
The vast majority of it is Rush Hour only, but I've already spoken with Adam on the Preserve crew, and it's relatively easy for each one to be added. So he is currently reviewing what needed to retrofit. Essentially, we need to switch it to use the new character system, which is now in the core. And will mean future updates happen one shot improves everything. So we're switching all the characters to use a core single character system. So there's that, and then there's adjusting some curves to make sure they happen correctly. Because one of the other problems we found when we were reviewing it, for example, is we actually have variable spawn values. So during the course of the day, if it's mid lunchtime, then Boston Station might not see massive numbers of platform of passengers, but if it's peak rush hour, then you'll see teeming numbers of people on the platform. Now that system's always been there, but when we actually looked at how the curves were in and what they do, it wasn't set up in a particularly ideal manner. So we've readjusted all of those curves so that the difference is more notable, and the amount of time it spends at peak hour was, I think, literally a minute previously. It spent its time building up to peak hour and then coming away immediately back down from peak hour, whereas now it's 2 hours of peak hour or something like that. So you're much more likely to see that. So there's changes like that, which just need to be, it's a case of looking at each route, just tweaking and tuning those settings, switching it to the character system. So it's not a huge job, but it is a job. So that is something that Preserve crew are looking into what they can do. The stairwalking stuff is a core improvement, so every route gets that immediately. And I think the marching problem might be core, but let's assume it's not.
Okay.
The safest thing is to assume it's not. Waiting areas specifically is something that needs to be authored on each route. It needs to be reviewed and authored on each route, but there'll be far fewer of those to worry about. That's not a massive thing. So, but yeah, consider most of it as needing Preserve crew to just go back through the routes and just update them.
So as we've mentioned, let's say again, for example, the US routes, they don't have people standing by the boards waiting to go to the train. This is something that you would have to manually change on the preserved route, and obviously in some cases you're just not going to need to.
Sorry, say that question one more time.
It's all right. So I've lost my train of thought now. Thank you. Basically, on the I can't remember what I just asked. Oh no, I've completely lost my train of thought. Thank you, Matt. Should we try a different question until I can't think of it again? That's awkward. Right, do the passengers no longer glow?
Do the passengers no longer
Glow.
glow? So they won't glow on the new routes, but that is an error on the route in those particular cases, and those errors are on the Preserve Cruise list of things to go and look at. We think it's a relatively straightforward fix that's to do with the way that lighting changed from 416 to 423, and it's just a question of going and finding all of the rogue lights and fixing them.
And while we're on the topic of passengers doing unusual things, have you changed the way they fly?
So the jetpack passengers has been a source of great pain and angst in the team, because everyone hates it. When we're watching a stream, particularly if it's one of ours or if we're watching somebody else's, and we see the jetpack passengers, it just makes everyone go, no. It just looks terrible. However, the engineers that have been looking at have had 3 or 4 weeks, literally, of trying to figure out what's going on there. And as is always the case with some of the greatest problems in software engineering, the minute you attach a debugger, everyone's on their best behavior. Actually, it's been really difficult creating reliable repros so that they can actually figure out what the situation is. Now, they have tried to put some measures in to try and contain it. Sorry?
I'm laughing because I know what's been done to try and contain it, and it should. Alright, this is one of those things. It shouldn't be funny, and I know that you guys don't like it, and I know a lot of the community don't like it, but I don't know why it makes me laugh so much. But please tell everybody what you've done to try and contain
So one of the things that's put in is that a speed limit has been imposed on the passengers, and if they exceed this speed limit, they are deleted. So that hopefully will make it look less bad. But it's a wrong solution, but it's an intermediate thing. We are still looking into it. I'm hoping there'll be some improvements. What I want to know is, once it's more out in the wild, whether you see an improvement. Has it gone completely, or are you seeing it? It should be better than it was. But let us know. And then we can see. So, but yeah, it's been one of those issues that has enraged the engineering team hugely. It's it's terrible. So I don't like that fix. Nobody likes that fix, but hopefully it will at least make it look less bad.
Yeah, and just because it does amuse me, because I find it quite funny, that doesn't mean that the issue isn't being taken seriously and it is being looked into.
Yeah, totally.
But no, it's the fact they have a speed limit, that's all.
I know when the engineering lead described it to me, I'm like, I shouldn't, that shouldn't be a reasonable solution, but apparently it is.
Yeah. Right. Back on to some community questions, if that's all good.
Yep.
These ones are from the forums. Will we get an increased number of options for our avatars? I know you've mentioned the different hairstyles already, but it has been mentioned that this user's driver keeps going bald in the 143 and the 112.
So there's been no change to avatars, and we're aware of some situations where characters suddenly change. We haven't pinned down exactly what it is yet, so don't expect an improvement on that for this release. But we are aware of it, and it's on the engineering backlog to get looked into.
Mm-hmm. Right, it's all well and good that there are more NPCs, but have DTG actually done anything in regards to the ambient sounds at stations? It can often be far too quiet sounding at big stations. There's no chatter or noise or anything like that.
So the audio system for stations does actually dial up and down the audio based on the spawn curve. So when you're at the peak hours, you should hear more loud chatter. Now, one of the problems is those curves weren't set correctly. So that's one thing we have improved with the rush hour route. So that alone will make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
As another goal of this, we have been when we've been talking with the audio team, we've asked them to specifically look at the ambient sounds around station areas in particular, but just generally along the route. But in this, particularly in Boston Station, for example, that's going to sound pretty specific. So we've asked them to really pay attention to that area. So I'm hoping you will appreciate some benefits in that. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then one of the questions from the forums also will lead us quite nicely into the next update with regards to passengers. So from the top left picture, I imagine this was from the article, it seems like we'll have some railroad employees standing around. That's absolutely great. Looking forward to seeing them in game myself. Do these employees only spawn in certain stations, in all stations, or also along the side of the line? This is a very long question, by the way. Are they permanently there, or do they randomly appear in certain locations? Now, you can give us a little more detail about those workers, can't you, and why they're there?
Yeah, so that's actually the last factor of the feature that's been added as part of the passenger improvements, which is what we call character dioramas, which is what you're seeing in that screenshot there with the two workers. So character dioramas are a way to inject variety in terms of the types of characters that are in use and what they're doing and so forth. Now, this is a very, very first use of the system. It's very limited in the way we have used it right now, but everybody on board the team, having sort of seen it start to be used, is starting to get creative and think about what they can do with it in future. Now, what it means, if you imagine that you've got a number of sockets on station platforms, and you've got a number of pieces.
Yes.
And those pieces might be a scene with 3 or 4 people. There might be a scene with one person. That person might be sitting down, kneeling down, lying down, talking to somebody. It could be a complex animation, could be simple. That's the concept of those pieces. And then essentially what will happen is that when you arrive at a station, whether you spawn there or whether you arrive there on train or something, it will look at all of the sockets and it will look at the time of day and the spawn density curves the rest of the passenger system is using. And then it will work out whether it should add some more of these character dioramas and plug them in randomly around based on the densities in there. So, for example, at lunchtime, you will see less of them than at rush hour. And it will also factor in the winter clothes and so forth and palletization in that as well. So it means that because once these characters are actually in the world, they cost very little except rendering. There's no CPU, whereas that makes them significantly cheaper than the AI characters that can walk around. So we wanted to improve the number of characters you have, full fat characters walking around, but then you weren't ever going to get to as many as we really wanted. So then the next goal was to add some of these set piece, these character dioramas in, which means we can get more creative with them, put some more interesting scenes in there. Now, as I say, for certainly the first release, it's a relatively limited use of it, but you can spot them. You already know where they are. That's because they sort of stand out as being different to what you've seen already. We can't put things like the high-vis workers into the normal character system because there'd be too many of them.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't look right. Whereas doing them this way, we can put them in specific places and in specific ways, and they're not then permanently there. So, like I said, you go to the station at midnight, there'll be a lot less, if any, of these dioramas spawning, and in different places as well.
With the dioramas as well, so let's say I chose a noon timetable service, right? Any route. If I always click on that same time, will those people always be there, or do they turn up randomly?
It's all random.
It's all
The
random.
decision for the character dioramas is taken at the point that you arrive in that particular area, and it will work out which selection of dioramas to use, which selection of sockets to use at that point. So yeah, if it's just like, for example, if you were to drive from Boston to Canton Junction, you might see a certain set of dioramas. Drive from Canton Junction to Stoughton, get round the other side, and drive back to Canton Junction. There'll be different characters there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the dioramas would be different because you left that area and came back again. They won't change while you're there. So all the time you're at a station, those characters will remain there. But leave to the point the station is not loaded anymore and come back, and then it will rethink about them and give you some different characters. Which means that running up and down the line, the stations won't feel like the characters aren't changing as well. So it's really interesting. I saw someone earlier asking about whether they appear in your yards, and in theory, this could be used for all sorts of things. We've mooted all sorts of things. We are only currently using them on stations. That was the initial goal for it. But we want to explore later other things like not in this route, not in any planned routes. One of the things that we want to explore, for example, is train spotters on a station bridge, for example, things like that. So there's all sorts of ideas that we want to be able to cope with. But at this point, it's a limited number of dioramas doing relatively basic things. I'm just trying to, set expectations here as a first use of this technology. And it's on stations only. But already, like I said, they already stand out as being, that's this. It's not hidden. It's really neat.
So as they're still quite new, which routes will currently be getting dioramas?
So rush hour routes will get the dioramas, and other routes will be something for the preserved collection to do. Again, it's the way system has been designed. It's been designed so that it's not onerous to add it to older routes. So I'm hoping that it's something that, as part of maybe a passenger overhaul for bringing the new characters on, it might be something that Adam's team can look at. But I don't want to be putting more work on Adam's shoulders. He's a very, very busy man. So suffice to say, we've tried to make it to where it's as easy as possible for the team to look at what they can do and consider that as part of their evaluations. So, but it will require going back to the route to add these extra assets to the route.
And then currently, because this is quite new, like you said, there's currently there's going to be a limited amount of scenes, should we say?
Yeah.
Yeah. But just to touch on to the potential of where we could go with these, I saw a lot of people asking earlier, actually, when we were discussing the updates to passengers, have we included people in wheelchairs and things like that? Is that something we could actually look into for these dioramas? Perhaps somebody waiting to get on the train on a wheelchair or with a guide dog or something along those lines to highlight some of those.
Yeah, totally. I mean, certainly, one of the things that we originally talked about when we talked about this feature was the ability to actually represent, wheelchairs, walking sticks, push chairs, prams, all these kinds of things potentially. To that we could do. So not included right now.
Definitely.
But,
just to reiterate that.
Yeah, just but these are all things that we can, look at doing. And so to add like wheelchairs, for example, into the system that stands, it's complex because you'd have to program the entire. What happens with someone in a wheelchair, or they got someone pushing them, or they're pushing themselves, the animation for that, they'd move around because they're on Nav Mesh, they'd need to be able to get onto the train. That's complex because of ramps and so forth. So whereas by doing these dioramas, you take all the complex technical stuff out, and it just becomes an art problem. Now that's not minimizing the amount of efforts needed to do the art side of it, but we've got a lot of really great artists and animators. So it's whereas the tech stuff is actually, is hard in a very different way. So this puts it in a space which is well known, well understood. And there's lots of animations that we can buy in potentially, and new animations we can create through motion capture and so forth, that we can do there. So it's potentially got a lot of fun for us in the future.
Yeah. But cannot stress the extras are very much just wishful thinking at the moment, and not even wishful thinking, it's sort of that's where we'd like to be.
It's a direction. It's the vision
Yes.
for the feature. But yeah, as it stands at the moment, it's I think it's 4 or 5 dioramas as it stands right now, that are relatively straightforward. But they prove the concept really nicely. They add a lot. They add a nice amount of extra to what we've got on the rush hour routes, and we are going to be looking to see what we can do more with them.
Hmm. Now, I'm going to ask a couple more questions with regards to passengers, and then we're going to go on to the next topic. But
Just
these.
before we move on to that,
Oh,
someone
go
actually
for it.
is using the use of the word diorama might be confusing. These are nothing to do with the
Yes,
dioramas
sorry.
on the front.
Yeah, no,
Someone
please do explain.
so dioramas, as they have previously been used, that word as it's been previously been used refers to the scene where you can see a train or a locomotive on the front menu screen. What
Hmm.
we're talking about here are character dioramas, which are completely separate and nothing to do with it, and don't use any of the same technology or anything. So there's a whole new feature that's in there. And someone else actually just talked about musicians and so forth. And
Yeah.
yes, potentially, you could set up something like that. You need to be really careful about what music they're playing, but then that's universally true, and you can buy licensable, music. So, in theory, you could do something. And again, it would be fun. It would add character to a route if because there's no reason why audio can't be linked
Hmm.
into these dioramas as well, which means that you would get potentially a busker on an underground station. One day you're there, and the next day he's not there anymore. So that would add a bit more surprise and character to what's going on with the routes. So it's an exciting
Yeah.
feature. I think a lot of the team hadn't fully appreciated just how much fun could be had with it until the first sort of prototypes of it in. And then I've had 2 or 3 of the team actually come back to me and say, "Oh, this is interesting." So
The limit here is going to be the imagination of the team.
yeah, oh yeah, it's imagination and time, really.
Yeah.
It's the two universal limiters,
Yeah.
and or two of the universal limiters. But the team have an endless imagination, so that's good. They're amazing. They're coming up with amazing ideas. Yeah, it's going to be trying to get some of this actually scheduled in,
Hmm.
so that we can take advantage of it. But yes, it's quite exciting. So the whole raft of stuff that's been done on passengers should make quite a significant difference the way that you see them. So yeah, I'm excited to see everyone's feedback on that actually.
And then one of the questions from the forums is with regards to the palletization. So that's the coloring, isn't it?
That's colouring, yeah.
I'm just going to use the question is regard to the coloring. Can the coloring tech also be applied to the cars on auto transporters, so they're not all pale and grey?
I don't know, in theory, and potentially if it can do that, it can do other things as well. So one of the areas that I want to look into, when there's time, is exactly well, okay. So palletization, where else can we use it? Because there's all sorts of places. So imagine if currently we might have 3 or 4 different same type cars in different colors. Well, with palletization, it'd be one car in more colors,
Mm-hmm.
which would actually be more efficient memory wise, but also give you more variety in terms of how it looks instead of red car, blue car, black car, red car, blue car, black car. It would be more variety with that stuff. So I think there's some interesting stuff that can be done there, but I don't know how applicable it is to those elements, and certainly no one's looked at it yet. So something to get into in the future.
Now, the chat have been asking if we've mentioned this a few times now. And I think some people are going to be quite happy with this news, aren't they, Matt? Do we have updates with regards to the livery designer and the scenario planner?
So as I mean, it's on the roadmap that we are currently figuring out what they are. But yes, they're coming. Um, so I want to be really clear at this point. We don't have a spec for what those things are. We have a long list of what we would like to put in there. I am firmly in the wish list territory in this conversation right now.
What is
So
something you can definitely confirm, though?
So one thing I can definitely confirm is we are looking at sharing, and we have been looking at it for a while. It's a complicated subject. We don't have any kind of release date for it yet, but we've wanted to come up with a sharing system that lets everybody on every platform is the goal.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make it on make your content on a PC, then you should be able to play that content on an Xbox or a PlayStation. We're looking at that. It's really complicated. There's lots of legal issues in terms of that. Less so for scenarios. That side of things is relatively straightforward, but the delivery side of it is difficult. So a lot of it. So the tech is actually being developed at the moment. It's actually well underway. It's going to be powered by Dovetail Live. So it'll be one system across all platforms, the goal is to actually just to make that available. Now, again, don't have any kind of timescale for that, but it's being worked on, and we're really trying to figure out really the processes behind it, what that means, how it might work.
Yes, with regards to it, obviously, what are the plans for how people would be able to share these? Where would they be able to share them? Is the big one really?
Well, so it's effectively it'll be tools inside the game. So you'll use the tools like the scenario designer and so forth to build your scenario, or use livery designers to build your livery, and then there'll be an option to just upload that to our system. I'm not going to give it a name. We don't have a name for it yet. It will not be Steam Workshop. Yes. Just because we need it to be multi-platform. Yeah. So if you ever hear any of us use the phrase workshop, it's because we're referring to Steam Workshop as a similar type of system, but it's not going to be based on Steam Workshop. Mikey says, how will livery sharing work with licensing issues? These are the things being resolved, Mikey, essentially. So we as in by the time the system launches, we will be able to tell you that. Mm-hmm. And then the same thing is when you're in the game, then there'll be a browser, so you'll be able to then find things that you want to download them, install them, and use them. So it's really exciting because there are so many people creating so many amazing liveries that are really fun. And there are also a lot of people out there, including me, that look at the livery designer and go, yeah, I can do a stripe. Just. And that's about my limit. And even then, everyone told me, don't do that again, Matt. Please don't do that again. So I want to benefit from everybody else's amazing work that they want to share. And this means you can do that. So everyone starts being able to benefit from this. It's very cool, and the same applies to scenario designer as well. Now we've got lots of things that. Go on, sorry, ask your question.
I was going to ask. It has been mentioned. So obviously we're talking about the livery designer being shared. Does this apply to the scenario planner? Are we planning the same kind of thing?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yes, it's I think it'll be great because again, I've seen some YouTube videos where people have made a scenario and played it, and actually what they've created is great. And I'm like, lots of people would really like to play that. Mm-hmm. Would be able to.
That would be great. I saw somebody, I've forgotten the name, but they said it should be called Dovetail Share, which is quite a nice name.
It's not a bad idea. We'll add that. I'll let you add that one to the list.
And we'll add it to the list of potential names. So it's quite exciting, even for so for people who enjoy the livery designer, it's an opportunity for them, and the people who enjoy the scenario planner, it's an opportunity for them to share their work with other people and let them enjoy it themselves. But it's also an opportunity for those who absolutely can't stand the tool to actually enjoy it themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. With some of the improvements we want to make to the tools themselves, hopefully you'll be able to do more with them, which will create even more possibility for what you're creating as well. So it should be really exciting. And the goal is to try and wrap up the ability to share with the improvements to the tools into a release.
Yeah, because obviously right now talking about the updated versions, it's bringing with it a lot of questions about what we're going to be doing to improve them. Do you have any information? Are you allowed to share any information at this point, or is it still too early days?
It's probably safest not to at this point. I mean, it's a fair bet. Most of the things that you're saying that you want are on our list already. The team internally have even since when we first launched it, we started building right. What would we do next?
Yeah.
And the scenario designer in particular got quite a long list. And we've been listening to the stuff that people have been saying, and there's some extra stuff we hadn't thought of,
Yeah.
an awful lot that we had already thought of, and that's great. It's good for confirmation that we're all thinking along the same lines. So it's about getting that stuff and then thinking about what we can do with it. So yeah, it should be. I mean, it's yeah. Well, we'll see. I don't know where we're going to get to. It's possibly not going to be the end all of all scenario systems, but what we're looking at potentially should be a massive improvement on what's already available.
That's great. That's great. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with everybody tonight, Matt? Because we have covered an awful lot, and I think we're about done.
I think we are, to be honest. I mean, that was the sharing stuff, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah.
The passenger stuff we've covered. One of the things that I did see in the forums was talking about passengers versus train volumes, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll cover that stuff up in more detail when we actually show off Boston.
Yes.
But what I will say is, yeah, we have taken that into account. One of the key design goals for timetables is from the rush hour experience, which we'll be carrying on with going forwards. It's not just for these 3 routes. It's kind of we've shifted how we make timetables. Really, is trying to add in the additional services, not just the player services on the main thrust of what you're doing on the route. So on the Boston timetable, for example, there is 3 or 4 times as many services than there are player services, because it covers off all the AI going in and out of all sorts of different places to Boston and around Massachusetts, not just the Boston Providence route. So actually standing on the end of one of the platforms at Boston is an exceptionally busy experience with trains, and Boston Station is manically busy. It's quite stunning. I was standing on the end of the platform, and at one point, and there was 3 trains coming in side by side. While another one was leaving. It was incredible. Exactly what you really want from a rush hour type experience. So yes, train volumes definitely being thought about as well as the passenger side of it.
That's brilliant. Now, obviously, this has made people ask about previews, and a lot of the stuff tonight, people have asked when are they going to see it. Leading up to the release of Rush Hour, we are going to be showing off everything we've discussed, aren't we?
Yeah, I don't know what the roadmap is for showing stuff off, but it's when Nat says, "Hey, let's show stuff off," you know me,
Yeah.
I am happy to show it. So yes, keep an eye out on the streams, and as soon as things are in the right place to show, rest assured we will be showing it as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Now, on Wednesday, tomorrow, we have Workshop Wednesday with Jamie. And I believe he's going to also be showing off some of the... I can't remember what was released on Friday. He'll be showing off something else on Workshop Wednesday tomorrow. And on Thursday, you are joined by JD, and you're going to be playing on Epic, aren't you?
Yes, we're going to be playing the Epic build. I think Thursday is when the Epic build actually goes live. For those of you that don't have Train Sim World 2, it'll be free, and you can keep it. It's free to keep on the Epic launcher. So we'll be basically saying hi to everybody playing the game, ourselves, talking about it, answering your questions. Yeah, I didn't get locked out, JP. I didn't get locked out.
He got completely locked out.
They changed things changed, and it was fixed. Literally the minute we ended the stream, it was fixed. It was so frustrating. But never mind, we got through it. But no, it's all looking good. I was playing the production build today, and it's looking spot on. So we're all in good shape for Thursday. So yes, JD and I will be having fun with Train Sim World 2 on Thursday.
And as of course we've focused on the passengers tonight, if you could show off some of what will be available with the core update, that would be wonderful.
Yes, so yeah, certainly you'll see the stair stepping passengers.
Yeah. Excellent. So thank you to everybody for joining us tonight, and thank you for your time, Matt.
Thank you.
Hope everybody has a good evening, and we'll see you on the stream tomorrow. So good night from me.
Good night from me. Thanks everybody.
Bye.